It's been just over 10 years since women began competing in the UFC. Over that span, the women's divisions have created some of the sport's biggest stars.
It's all over! Just like that! It's over!
So we set out to create a list. We polled 24 industry insiders, that's athletes, coaches, journalists, to come up with a list of the top 10 best UFC female fighters of all time. Here's what they came up with. Current flyweight champion Alexa Grasso's career-defining submission of Valentina Shevchenko got her on our list at number 10, just behind the legendary Miesha Tate and Holly Holm. In the middle of our list, 3 women who have each tangled in some epic strawweight battles. Rose Namajunas' 2 title reigns placed her 7th, just behind current champion Zhang Weili, with dominant former strawweight queen Joanna Jędrzejczyk landing at 5. This brings us to the Mount Rushmore. At number 4, Cris Cyborg didn't receive a single first-place vote, but had the second most second-place votes. At number 3, the woman who started it all in the UFC, Ronda Rousey. Three of our voters gave Rousey first-place votes, the second most among any fighter. At number 2, it's Valentina Shevchenko, the Bullet, who won 9 straight fights between 2018 and 2022, picked up 32% of all second-place votes.
This is what I am. This is true championship mind, that you're never satisfied with your performance.
And no surprises at number 1, the GOAT, Amanda Nunes. 75% of voters had Nunes number 1 on their ballot, and she was the only fighter to appear on every single ballot.
I told you!
Ronda Rousey at number 3, a very interesting selection. Where do you think that she falls in terms of this order? If you were to submit this survey and these rankings, where's Ronda Rousey on your list?
I mean, Ronda Rousey is number 1, and probably always will be, because the rest of the list doesn't exist if Ronda Rousey never existed. When people will look historically back and they'll hear that Dana White said a woman will never fight in the UFC, they'll think it's part of a storyline. This was truthful. When you were living there at the moment, this man wasn't saying this to be provocative. There were never going to be women ever fighting in the UFC. And Ronda Rousey changed his mind. Then became the greatest champion, the only champion at her time, was incredibly dominant. There is no Amanda Nunes breaking UFC records if there is no Ronda Rousey.
Once in a lifetime does not apply to Ronda Rousey. It's once ever.
Well, we don't know that for a fact. Like, we don't know that for, eventually the UFC might have buckled and said, hey, women are doing big things over in these other promotions. Strikeforce they eventually bought. So maybe they would have just folded in those divisions. Now, I think that Ronda Rousey was, of course, the catalyst for all of this. But if we're going to take a look at what, I guess, is the measure of greatness in terms of dominance, win streak, championship run, Ronda's mixed martial arts run as a whole, in totality, is about 5 years long. I don't know if she has the body of work to be number 1 on this list. In fact, I have her at number 4. If I was to make a list, she would be falling behind Amanda Nunes, Cris Cyborg, and Valentina Shevchenko, in my opinion.
When I see people argue on Facebook and Twitter about these sorts of lists, always one of the problem is, what are we talking about? And sometimes we see people argue, they're arguing 2 different arguments. When we say the body of someone's entire MMA career, their body of work, if we say that is fighting and winning, well, everything you're saying makes sense. But a body of work includes the things that the body of work accomplished, the importance of that body of work, how that body of work sits in the realm of history. And if we agree that that is what it means to create a body of work, but Ronda's body of work created women in fighting. The argument is, well, maybe they'd have got there another time, and maybe they wouldn't have. Maybe it'd be this year. Maybe none of these people would be on that list, or maybe it would have been never. Dana White and the people who ran the UFC truly thought that, at least at that time, that this was not a woman's sport in the way that they presented it. Now, of course, they were wrong, and it's admitting you were wrong is a powerful and admirable thing, and they do admit it. But until Ronda Rousey sat down with him, not just was performing well, was succeeding, sat down, pitched him, convinced him, talked to him. He understood this was a star. Amanda Nunes is a brilliant martial artist. If we're just talking martial artistry, she's top of my list. But Ronda Rousey was a powerful, influential star that influenced him and influenced the world of ground fighting. History must remember that there is women fighting in the UFC because of Ronda Rousey, and if they do, then she's number one.
Most of the people on this list that Amanda Nunes was able to fight because of weight classes, she beat. And I think if we're talking about the best and a measure of greatness that we're looking at tangibly, we have to look at the resumes. And I think that Ronda Rousey has a great resume. I mean, I've always said, and I think a lot of people have echoed that, you know, in hindsight, maybe people don't believe this, but at the time, she was like Mike Tyson. It was like her walking to the cage, you were waiting to see how many seconds it would take of her to dispatch the poor soul that was standing in front of her. That was the aura that Ronda Rousey had. If you weren't there at the time and you're kind of new to mixed martial arts, I understand, but you had to kind of be there to see Ronda Rousey walking to the cage, Joan Jett playing on the speakers, and see what she was able to do. But again, if we're talking about overall greatness and the best, you do have to take resume into account, and I think that Amanda Nunes is clearly number one.